Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the astrological chart of Marianne Faithfull, the singer and former lover of Mick Jagger and involved in the swinging 60s, who then had a serious drug problem and made a comeback in the late 70s with an album called Broken English. I read her autobiography several years ago and I found it to be very riveting, but like a lot of things, I do forget some of the details of these people's lives after I read them. So I just looked up on Wikipedia just to get like a refresher on the chronology of things. And my intention for this particular recording or video is to look at some of the things that happened to her or that she chose in her life, however you want to look at it. And I'm even talking about the type of circumstance she was born into, because she had royalty on her mother's side. I think they said Austrian, Hungarian, I don't know, something. She had some kind of like sometimes she would have been like a baroness, or maybe her mother would have been. That I want to talk about that because I did remember that part in the book a little bit. I'll elaborate on that in a minute. But because her sun is in Capricorn, I do think that that is a sign that is very sensitive about social standing. And also the fact that she was born in England, that is also very class conscious. As a matter of fact, I think England is a Capricorn nation, or is it London? I think it's the whole country, which would make perfect sense if that were true on multiple levels. But anyway, I'm going to be looking at the status, like the type of family, how does it show up in the chart, if it does, her drug issues, can you see that in the chart? And what compels people to get involved, not only with experimenting, but with addiction. And then artistic talents, desires, abilities. I also consider her to be a fine writer, so I would put that in the mix as well. So the other day, somehow I came upon this video of her that somebody had made, and they just compiled some footage from some French movie. I think it was a French movie that she made in 1968, and she was like riding a motorcycle. She had like a full leather outfit. I'm sure the director or the creator of the movie, he might have created the movie just to get her in that leather outfit. But she did a version of Bob Dylan's song called "It's All Over Now, Baby Blue," and I just watched another video of hers where she did a version of another popular song, well, of a very popular song in the 60s by a British artist. And I thought she did an okay job, but it wasn't anything special. But when she did a cover of Dylan's song, I thought that it was much more her type of song. So while I was watching this footage of her, I was looking at her, and she had an ethereal look. And I suspected that she probably had already gotten involved with heroin at that point. There was something about her appearance. I mean, she was a beautiful woman. I think she also did modeling as well. But I'm not 100% sure on that. I couldn't find that on Wikipedia, or I didn't look hard enough. But she was definitely involved in the music scene, so maybe I'm wrong about the modeling. But she had this otherworldly kind of a look that's very alluring when somebody is doing things like modeling, or, for instance, if they're in a movie, and the movie, it might not be the strongest movie, but they want to kind of push the movie by just having some kind of an alluring female character. It's like you can't take your eyes off of her. And she had this, the way that she was, her expressions were like very Piscean. And I was thinking to myself, there's just so much about her. There was like this kind of vulnerability that is not something I associate with Capricorn. So I was looking to try to see if I could find, I said, I bet you she's got Pisces. And as soon as I picked up this, I plugged in the information and generated this chart. Her moon is in Pisces. So there you go. And she's also got a couple of hard angles to Pisces. To Neptune, the ruler of Pisces. So, and her moon is in the 12th house, which is Pisces house. Not only is it in Pisces, but it's in the 12th house. So, the first thing I want to do is just talk about her rising sign, which could be her physical appearance. It's actually in Aries, so her ruler is Mars, but it's very close to Taurus. As a matter of fact, it's 28 degrees 4 minutes. I thought it's a 54, and I thought, oh, it really is on the cusp, but it is still on the cusp. And Taurus is ruled by Venus and can have that sense of that overt beauty. With Aries, there is a strong independent streak, obviously. And so if somebody has Pisces in a prominent position like the moon sign, especially in the 12th house where there's a lot of vulnerability, this can offset that and can make the person quite courageous. And also, I think the most important thing is that both Aries and Capricorn are cardinal signs, along with Libra and Cancer. She doesn't have those in her personal points, but she does also have Mars in Capricorn. So she has 3 cardinal signs in her personal points. And so even if somebody becomes a drug addict, if they have a lot of cardinal energy, they're going to be somebody who is not complacent with that kind of situation. Some people just get very comfortable in their addiction and they just stay, kind of rotting away, you could say. And there are people who have addictions and they are also functional to some degree. So I don't know what year she quit drugs, but I just looked and she was still, even when she had her comeback, she was still struggling with drugs. So, and that's what I thought. She didn't go into rehab until the mid-80s. And, this is not always the case. There's some addicts who just completely stop creating if they are artists, or if they are holding down jobs. They either get fired and don't look for more work, or they just quit so they can just use full time. So that can be a saving grace. And I would attribute that to her cardinal energy, her sun being in Capricorn, and Capricorn just being a natural, you could say workaholic, but at least worker bee, and really believing that that is something that a person is supposed to be doing. And then with the rising sign of Aries, it's almost like choosing a life of adventure. And adventure can have some very strange twists and turns for sure. So, looking at her inner planets here, when somebody has the sun in Capricorn, they're going to really measure their success as a person by how high they ascend professionally. That's a very important thing because Capricorn rules the 10th house of career. It's a no-brainer that that's how they would feel. Now, I have pointed out that there have been famous yogis, Paramahansa Yogananda, to just name one, who were Capricorns. And so, how does that work if you are in the spiritual, I was going to say business? How does that work? Do you still want to be famous? Successful and whatnot? Well, you might transfer that desire for success in the world and recognition of your talents in the world to a spiritual ascension of sorts. So, improving your life um, spiritually so that you achieve some of your spiritual goals. And of course, they will vary from person to person. So, there could still be ambition there, but it is directed towards the spiritual side of life rather than the material, the glory, whatever you want to call it. And Marianne had a square between the Sun and Neptune, which further probably obscured her sense of self. And, again, as a Capricorn sun sign, that would have been especially upsetting because trying to define oneself could have proved very frustrating. When somebody has a conjunction between the Sun and Neptune, or a friendly angle, trine, sextile, but I would say especially like a conjunction, or the Sun in the 12th house, there can be like a very easy, there can be an easy attitude as it pertains to not needing to have an identity, which is part of that spiritual kind of teaching about, especially like Buddhism, not having a self, the no self, that kind of thing. And not needing that at all, and being comfortable without it. But when there's a square, when there's friction like that, or in the other cases it would be the opposition, the person can be very driven to have what they can't have. So it makes them want it more, perhaps. And it's very elusive because for whatever reason, and I think part of that is the moon's influence being in Pisces and being in the 12th house, it really kind of takes over the sun and makes a person much more likely to have that confusion about what it is that they want out of life, because that's what the sun can be about, like what your aspirations are. And when there's a square to Neptune, it can be very hazy, and therefore it feels frustrating, like you don't know how to even approach things. She also has a square between Mars and Neptune. This is like having Mars and Pisces, but an afflicted Mars and Pisces. And Mars and Pisces is already, I was going to say, teetering on the edge. Mars is all about going after things, going for our goals, or having these desires. But when you have a square to Neptune, those desires can be quite distorted. Those goals can be distorted. And, Pisces is the symbol of two fish swimming in opposite directions. So the person, with this Neptune, this hard angle from Mars to Neptune, might struggle to really even identify their goals, because as soon as they think they want something, they change their mind. Maybe they stop wanting it, their emotions change, so their desires change. And it can, I can see it being very frustrating for somebody in that situation, because they really feel like, hey, what should I do? Where should I go? But this is one of the examples of addiction, like a red flag. If you have Mars in Pisces, or if you have a hard angle, I think even a conjunction might be hard. A hard angle in this. Well, I mean, might be a challenging aspect to have when it makes contact with Neptune, because Mars is the drive, and the person may be driven to addiction. It's actually being driven to escapism. So it won't always be substance abuse. It might be some other kind of diversion, distraction. But it can indicate self-destructive tendencies for sure. And I just want to say that I'm not claiming that everybody who has this aspect is going to meet with the same fate that happened to Marianne Faithfull. But it's just like kind of a warning that it's very important when somebody with this aspect elects to do something that they really think it through. Like, why am I doing this? It could be anything that they're doing, to make sure that their motives are in the right place, so they're not doing something because they're trying to escape an uncomfortable feeling, or they're just like having a hard time coping with the reality of a situation. So anyway, I think that's one marker of that, along with the Sun square Neptune. I think that can also create addiction tendencies sometimes, because having the Sun like this can be like having the Sun in Pisces, but it's kind of a troubled Sun, and the person may struggle to feel like they feel that they're not doing something important in life, and then they feel bad about themselves, and that could like lower their self-esteem, and then it's a whole thing. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. Speaking of conjunctions, she has a conjunction between the Sun and Mars. If you have a conjunction between the Sun and Mars, this is like having the Sun in Aries in particular. Yeah, you could say Scorpio because it's co-ruled by Mars, but I would say Aries because it's just purely ruled by Mars. So again, it's this person who may be very ambitious, very courageous. So no matter what happens to that person, they're not down for the count. A fighter, I use that terminology, and it really is, I always associate Aries with boxing and things like that, and maybe martial arts. But it's a warrior energy. So that's really interesting. So just a little background about her growing up years. Apparently she had some kind of nobility on her mother's side, but for whatever reason, I can't remember what the reason was, they didn't have contact with that family. They didn't have money. They didn't benefit financially from having that lineage, let's put it that way. So, and then her parents divorced when she was 6, so she was left with her mother, and I guess, I don't know how much her father supported the family, because they said in Wikipedia that she was suffering financially. She even had to receive some kind of, like she was going to the school, but they were paying for her tuition, so whatever you call that, some kind of a charity thing. And I remember reading in the book, like, it seemed like they had, her and her mother had hard financial times. So The point is that this kind of thing can also be very stressful for somebody who is a Capricorn because, but it, the interesting thing about Capricorn is that they're not afraid to work for what they have. So again, it might have lit a fire under her, and having Aries rising may have, been just what she needed to prove herself when she got older, or to, promote herself. Um, so her moon in Pisces and in the 12th house means that she was a very sensitive soul. And sometimes just that alone can make a person feel like they're misunderstood because this world is not the most sensitive, catering to sensitive people. Let's face it. But when you put that moon in the 12th house, that exacerbates that situation. And what can occur is that the person feels unloved as a result. And I don't know that she had a negative relationship with her mother. I do think she had a positive one, but I wonder about the relationship with her father, and I feel like that situation may have contributed to the relationships she had later on with men where it wasn't really satisfactory. And I don't know if she ever found true love. I mean, she had some, for instance, with Mick, that didn't last, and then there were others. And so there's a sense when you have the moon in the 12th house, it makes you incredibly empathic. And she also has Venus in Scorpio, so she had other water in her personal planets. And yet it was kind of contrasted by this Capricorn energy. Her Mercury is in Sag, and then the Aries rising, so that's fire too. Um, the thing about fire is that sometimes it gets accused of being insensitive because it's very, the masculine energy can be very aggressive, very brash. It's not necessarily tuning into people and appreciating that. It's just kind of, very active and out there, not inside. But I think that when you have a combination of these things, it can be a saving grace because, a moon in Pisces with somebody who is already, if they've already had other issues going on, can be very debilitating because that person may feel like a victim. And that's what the 12th house can represent as well. And they may even see their mother as a victim with the moon in Pisces because of that connection between the moon and the mother. And for a girl or for a female, this can be especially damaging because that's her role model, a person who she sees as kind of a victim of circumstance, a victim of a man, and she doesn't have there's a weakness, in other words. She doesn't have a strong role model. And I'm not saying, by the way, that the sign of Pisces is just completely weak. There can be that because the problem is that Pisces, in a sense, doesn't mind being perceived that way because it's that martyrdom that, seeks to show everybody how abused they've been. I mean, when I say abused or neglected or whatever you want to call it. And that's why a person who has a prominent Pisces has to really get it clear in their head exactly what has occurred and how to frame it in the most self-empowering way. Because you can be a victim of somebody in the literal sense and yet not build an identity off of that. Because she has both the Sun and Mars, and they form a conjunction in Capricorn, and Capricorn is a very hard-boiled sign, it can be one of those situations where the person spiritually or psychologically bypasses and just focuses on their goals. And sometimes that can be very beneficial, but you can't do that continuously. You can't always use work as an escape or a distraction. But sometimes these things can be very helpful in doing something constructive when the person is hurting emotionally. And I think too, having the moon in the 12th house can make the person also prone to substance abuse, and also having it in Pisces. It's a double whammy. Substance abuse, because the person really feels a sense of vulnerability and maybe a lack of, I don't know how to put it, like a lack of emotional understanding from the people that are close to them. And whether we say it's mixed in with self-pity, or if the person simply has felt like emotionally abandoned and they have a very good case to feel that way. The bottom line is that by being able to realize that other people are also hurting, like, if a parent doesn't give you what you needed emotionally, what was going on in their life? What kind of childhood did they have? Were they even capable of giving you what you needed? Did they have that emotional wherewithal to be able to do that? A lot of times you'll find out that they didn't, and therefore they couldn't give you what they didn't possess. And it can make it easier to make peace with that sort of reality, because then you don't take it personally. You don't think that it's some kind of an indictment against your worth as a human being. So in addition to the 12th house being the house of addiction, it's the house of solitude. But you could also say isolation. So the person may have felt very alone emotionally, and it's the house of escapism. So that's one of the reasons it's associated with substance abuse or addictions or other type of addictions. But, sometimes, again, these things they serve a purpose for a while. The key is knowing when to let go of them. Another thing about this, it's called the house of undoing, and it is because of these self-defeating patterns that the person may hold. In this case, somebody with the moon here, it's on the emotional level. And it could be, their emotional attitudes, and, if there's a learned helplessness in life, if the person learns that if they have problems and they can't solve those problems because for some reason there is no one willing to help them or what have you, that can carry over into adulthood, and then coping skills are not present. Sometimes I'm pretty sure that this is one of the key things that they teach in recovering from substance abuse, is how to develop coping strategies that are going to be helpful in allowing the person to make better choices so that they don't fall back into numbing themselves out. In the second house of earned income, she has North Node in Gemini, so there's that writer. That's the soul's mission, is to communicate in some way and maybe make a living through it. And she also has Uranus, which can indicate erratic fortunes, like easy come, easy go. But even like working as a singer, that would also indicate that, or an artist in general, of, you know, not having a weekly paycheck, getting paid whenever, whatever. It could indicate, though, that the winds of fortune blow that person's way, and sometimes they might be getting, something good. Erratic doesn't have to mean deprivation. But with the North Node in the second house, the person came into this lifetime to experience standing on their own 2 feet in terms of supporting themselves. So it really does go along with what I was just saying about, having this noble lineage and yet not having the financial support that usually we would associate comes with that, and having to support oneself. And, some people in that same position might be like, oh, wow, I should be able to be set for life, if I'm royalty or what have you. But that was not meant to be, obviously. She was meant to support herself, and that she has done. And so, again, with Uranus in the second, it can be erratic income, unpredictable income. And so I want to just talk about some of these other houses and how they may have played into things. In the sixth house, she has Neptune here. That's what I have that as well. And sometimes this can, especially since she has that square between the Sun and Neptune. So the Sun is coming from the ninth house, which is very interesting too, because I would associate that with the writer or the academic or some kind of spiritual pursuit. And then she has Neptune in the sixth, but they're squaring off. So one thing that can happen is if a person doesn't feel that they have a strong sense of themselves, they can go in other directions in order, like kind of like throwing things against a wall to see if something sticks. And I'm not saying that's what she did, because in fact she had a has had a career as a singer for many years. I think, people probably thought she was a flash in the pan, and she managed to reinvent herself several times throughout her career. And but with Neptune in the sixth house, this can give kind of like a spiritual attitude towards the idea of service. So somebody who is a Capricorn sun sign will typically think of work as something that they're doing, that they feel has a constructive purpose. Maybe they can climb a ladder of success or whatever, things like that. The artistic profession and the spiritual, like healing arts professions, are off the beaten path and not necessarily what you will see with somebody who is born under the sign of Capricorn. Now, I am not saying this 100% of the time, but if you see a Capricorn person who is an artist, see if they have Pisces placements that are, or if you are this person, you will likely have something that kind of counters that tendency to see the world in a certain way, and that will give that artistic vision, or sensibilities, whatever you want to call it. Because Neptune in the sixth house can make a person quite confused about their, what they came here to do for work, or they can actually in some cases it can be drug addiction that's like a full-blown addiction, because the sixth house is one's daily routines, and Neptune here can mean that the person is just completely living life in the moment without any kind of organized patterns. But like I said, I have this here, and I can certainly see that within myself, but not, not everybody who has this is going to be uh, into drugs. But this is Neptune is connected to drugs, and the sixth house is health. So sometimes people who have Neptune in the sixth house can have mysterious health conditions. So they have to be very careful, anybody with Neptune in the sixth house, when it comes to treating conditions with drugs, because the person may be super sensitive to them and they may get more affected than the average person. And let's see what else. I wanted to, before I talk about the romantic side of things, I just wanted to see if there's anything else that speaks to her as an artist. Well, yes, in the seventh house, I'll just talk about all that this represents. In the seventh house, she has Chiron. She also has a conjunction with Venus and Jupiter. Now, Venus and Jupiter are both planets that they're called benefics. So they have like this reputation for being very positive, whether, with Jupiter, good luck, and with Venus, ease, but they can speak about money. So somebody who has just Jupiter in the seventh house could, marry somebody with wealth. And that can, but also somebody who expands their life in some way. So if that person, and of course, if somebody does have wealth, they can expand that person's life because maybe they'll be able to travel and, see different things than they normally do. It just expands everything, their geography, their financial status, everything. But Venus, when somebody has a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, that bodes well for money in general. But the seventh house can also be the person's public relations. And it is, I don't remember exactly how to explain this, but I did remember reading somewhere that Venus in the seventh can be somebody who has a musical career. I think they specify music, but an artistic career, let's put it that way. But I don't know exactly how that really why that is. Although I will say that the seventh house is ruled by Venus in the sign of Libra. And I mean, this is a house of committed partnership. So not really sure. Public relations is another aspect of that, but I would think that would be more self-promotion. But anyway, so there's that. And then Chiron here, just for like love matters, relationship matters, commitment issues, Chiron here might suggest somebody who encounters another person who cannot commit. And maybe this is a pattern. And so that can be a woundedness because the person may feel as if they're not worth it. They're not worth somebody committing to. And that can do a number on their self-esteem. So anyway, for what that's worth, the eighth house, she has Mercury. And she's written 2 autobiographies. I think that it's almost like it's a purge for her because the eighth house is about purging, transformation. It's almost like by her writing some things, especially since there were not all flattering things, talking about some of her struggles, that it's kind of an exorcism of sorts. So then she can get it out. And also maybe it's like catharsis. And this can indicate somebody that has a very good grasp of psychology, that understands how other people tick, but she does have this definite psychic element to her. And, with the moon in the 12th house, it does make for a much more sensitive Capricorn for sure. And that also applies to empathy, having empathy for others. But sometimes when somebody is an empath, it's almost like unbearable, the feelings that they have, because since they can feel the feelings of other people, it's like it's not just enough to suffer themselves. They have to feel the suffering of other people, and that can be quite a lot. So that might be something that is not very pleasant. And then I want to mention the sun is in the 9th house with Mars. And I think, and she also has a trine between the moon and Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of the 9th house in astrology. Sagittarius is ruler. And this can give her kind of a sub-influence of sun in Sagittarius. And because she has the moon trining Jupiter, there must be something within her that is very positive, that is very, that she believes in better days ahead. And so no matter how far somebody sinks who has, certain tendencies, they can always, resurrect themselves, if you will. And that can be very helpful. And I'm just seeing about anything else I wanted to talk about. Oh, and that can bode well for somebody who loves to travel, who loves to expand their consciousness. She was attributed as a one who turned on Mick Jagger to a book that influenced his writing of the song Sympathy for the Devil. And that kind of thing, that shows like a literary interest, which is the higher mind. And that's indicated here with the sun here. So the last thing I want to mention is that she has a conjunction between Saturn and Pluto in the 5th house of creativity and love. When somebody has Saturn in the 5th house, there could have been a time in their life where, when they were a child, because the 5th house, like the 4th house, can deal with childhood, but the 5th house is the inner child. So it's like the status of that part of you that lives on past childhood. And that's what creativity is all about, really, if you think about it. So when somebody has Saturn here, it can definitely indicate that they're making a career out of their art. But it can also indicate that when they were young, there was an event that occurred that instantly made them be an adult. And maybe that was when her parents got divorced when she was only 6 years old. And then, then her mother suffered financial difficulty after that time. And so that created more of the tension or the stress that her family was under. So, and Pluto here, I think with that combination, with that conjunction, this person can have an indomitable spirit that doesn't dissuade them from continuing to be creative. Nothing can stop them. And I think that can actually be the saving grace. They say wherever Pluto is in your chart, that's where you experienced the most transformation. So in her case, that would be the area of creativity and love, maybe the important loves of her life really helped to transform her as well. Okay, well, that's where I'm going to leave it. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.